Could we just get a basic introduction, name, and however you wish to introduce yourself as far as your position?
I'm David Yermack. I'm chairman of the finance department at the NYU Stern School of Business.
Excellent, thank you. So, Dr.
Professor.
Professor Yermack, I was very interested in some of the applications of blockchain, and certainly everybody now is trying to stick blockchain everywhere they can. It's a buzzword, and they're trying to solve every problem with it. But certainly not every problem can be solved efficiently with blockchain. What are some of the other industries beyond shipping and logistics that you feel could most benefit from the blockchain technology?
There are many potential uses. Just to pick a couple, healthcare seems to be one that there's a lot of interest in. There's more data created around healthcare and medicine than any other industry, and the security of the data is a big issue. And so obviously, if you have an innovation in data security, which is what the blockchain is, it's natural to look to fields such as healthcare, where people are greatly concerned about the accuracy of medical records and also privacy, who does and who doesn't have access to them. I think the biggest customer, though, in the long run is actually government. I think that you're going to see blockchains to record real estate ownership, vital statistics about births and deaths. In some countries, they're using it for university degrees so that people don't lie about their educational credentials. But I think obvious areas like border security and ownership of automobiles and all kinds of aspects of property. Governments already keep ownership ledgers for land and auto and liens on goods and so forth. And I think you're going to see those very naturally move onto blockchains where there's more accuracy and security than in the systems that you see now. And the killer app is probably central bank digital currency. That there's already a lot of interest by central banks to move from paper money and coins and to issue electronic money using a big national blockchain that might be updated by the Federal Reserve. So I think this is actually coming quite quickly, maybe as soon as this year in some countries.
Excellent. You mentioned banking as one of the main functions, but you also are aware of the fact, clearly, that there's 1,500 different coins out there. How do you see those two reconciling each other? Because we certainly can't operate on a global currency when there's 1,500 different variations on it. Do you think that one primary will emerge? Do you think there'll be multiples, or is there some other way that this will solve itself or play out?
I actually don't expect government money to disappear. I just think government money will reformulate itself as electronic currency on blockchains. But you get a lot from the central bank in conducting monetary policy and manipulating interest rates that people actually find valuable. And I think for that reason, government currency is not going anywhere. But it does seem that private exchange over blockchains, certainly on a business-to-business basis, is probably going to grow. And you're probably just going to see competition among different currencies for payments. Ripple is one that has made a lot of inroads for international remittances. But I think there's room for a lot of competition. There doesn't have to be just one. And even as there are 1,500, there's really only 8 or 10 that are widely used. One of the lessons, though, in technology is that innovation is very hard to hold back. That in the internet, we saw products like search engines and browsers regularly get overtaken every 18 months or so by better versions from other companies. So if you look at the coins we have today, the Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ether, so forth, I expect new ones will overtake them, probably haven't even been developed yet, but it's the nature of technology that you're going to see constant improvement and progress.
You also touched upon the subject of clients as owners, where the coins can be used almost as if they were a definition of ownership within certain projects or certain companies even. And this issue comes with a concern as well, though, which is venture capitalists, when they invest, of course, they do a lot of due diligence, but a person buying a coin in a project might not do the same due diligence as a business would. Is there any concern that this may cause problems?
No, I don't see this as a problem because you can always outsource the due diligence to third parties. So when you talk about a customer having an ownership stake in a business, it can be no more complicated than somebody who holds frequent flyer miles on an airline. You know, I have a big account with United Airlines, who I fly on all the time, And this sort of makes me an owner along with hundreds of thousands of other customers. And I don't read the balance sheet of United Airlines, but I know that there are other people who do, that they have auditors, there are investment researchers. So it's not that you need everybody to understand the source code and everybody to do the due diligence. You just need it to be made available to the market in a transparent way such that people who have that expertise can look at it and put their opinions into circulation. So we've always relied on specialists who are experts to really do the heavy lifting of analyzing finances. And I don't think that's going to be any different in the crypto world than it's been really for hundreds of years in the financial markets.
Sure. But the financial markets are much more regulated than the crypto world is, which is one of the issues that we have.
Yeah, that regulation has always been controversial. There is a school of thought that thinks that the securities laws over-regulate the markets in the U.S., that this has really been a big theme since Sarbanes-Oxley was passed in 2003, that there's too much regulation and it chases people out of the U.S. markets and invites them to go to places like Hong Kong and Singapore, where there's a much lighter touch and more freedom of information or innovation in the marketplace. I think the optimal amount of regulation is hard to know, and it's quite possible that you can have too much or too little. And we really rely on competition between governments to kind of arrive at outcomes that, that may or may not be good for any one country. There's room really for many approaches. And you can have jurisdictions that regulate a lot, jurisdictions that don't regulate so much, and then people can choose where they want to issue securities. Customers can choose where they want to invest. But I think you have to understand, if you invest in the U.S., there's a very high regulatory burden that is going to drive maybe some of the more innovative companies right out of the market.
Touching again on the subject of the competition between governments, one of the issues you mentioned was the tax implications and how that's driving a lot of this development or a lot of these businesses outside of the U.S. But places like Puerto Rico, and in fact before Puerto Rico, even St. Croix, had incentives where if you relocate or establish yourself in these markets, you get 4% tax rate or even lower sometimes. Do you think that may be a way to retain that industry in the U.S.?
Yes, there are definitely safe havens, and Puerto Rico is interesting because they have certain sovereign rights that they're taking full advantage of. I think rationally, you don't really want this race to the bottom among jurisdictions, cutting taxes against each other, because in the end, nobody collects any taxes, and maybe that's not optimal. But I wouldn't rule out that you could have safe havens in places like Puerto Rico that are technically within the U.S., but really creating an enclave where people take advantage of the low tax protection. But there are trade-offs with this, not the least of which is that you have to have a presence and operate some of the business there, perhaps, and that may be costly in its own way. I think that historically, the signal of where you choose to locate and which laws you choose to be covered by has been something that investors put a lot of value on. And so, in the world of public companies, a Delaware registration has always been, kind of the gold standard. But you're getting a bundle of costs and benefits. It's nice to have the case law of Delaware, but there are franchise taxes. There's a pro-business bias that shareholder activists don't always like. And I think you're going to see these idiosyncrasies develop in the crypto world too, although maybe more on an international basis, frankly, than within the 50 states in the U.S. and the territories such as Puerto Rico. But we're at early stages, and one thing I've learned is it's very hard to predict with a lot of accuracy where this is going, because it's moving very fast and often in very unexpected ways.